I think it's safe to say that most people's first real exposure to Digimon was through the anime, and that's especially true for fans outside of Japan. Digimon Adventure is, for better or worse, the version of Digimon that solidified itself in the public consciousness. The kids, the crests, the dramatic mid-episode evolution sequences, and the idea that Digimon was the more story-driven, more emotional, more personal, and more introspective counterpart to Pokémon. But what often gets lost in hindsight is that the anime was by no means the origin of Digimon's ideas. It was an adaptation. And some of the most important creative decisions that shaped Digimon Adventure didn't come from animation studios or writers' rooms, but from a line of small plastic electronic toys. And among those toys, none were more influential than the Digimon Pendulum. The original Digimon virtual pets were already a successful mutation of the Tamagotchi formula. Like Tamagotchi, they revolved around caring for a digital pet and featured branching evolutions, but Digimon featured multiplayer combat, reframing monster raising as something aggressive and competitive rather than purely nurturing. At the same time, these ideas were still constrained by the simple technology the toys were built around. Training your Digimon was equal parts straightforward and abstract, and battles were almost entirely chance-based. Any technical depth existed behind the scenes, out of the player's view. Win rates were influenced via methods the toy never fully explained. Evolution paths were opaque, often frustrating, and could feel arbitrary, even when you were doing everything right. By the time Bandai held the first D1 Grand Prix tournaments, a clear problem had already emerged: homogeny. The Digimon V-Pets assigned each species of Digimon a base win rate out of 16, meaning certain monsters were inherently stronger than others. As such, most tournament finalists gravitated toward the same small handful of top-tier Digimon, and competitive play quickly narrowed around a few optimal choices. The system technically offered variety, but functionally discouraged experimentation. So, when it came time to design the second generation of Digimon virtual pets, Bandai's response was obvious. It was to make the core gameplay deeper. The Digimon Pendulum was officially announced alongside the second D1 Grand Prix on October 14, 1998, during V-Jump's Autumn Digimon Festival. The name Pendulum wasn't chosen for its technical meaning, but because it was inspired by the pendulum backbreaker move in professional wrestling. Kensuke Ota reportedly chose it simply because it sounded cool, only to later discover what the word actually meant and feel briefly disappointed, until the final design ended up using a literal pendulum sensor anyway. Marketing worried that the word might be too strange, especially for Japanese children unfamiliar with English loanwords, but Ota argued that this was precisely why kids would latch onto it. The pendulums were also priced slightly higher than the original digital monster pets, a difference generally attributed to the increased number of moving parts inside the device. In-universe, the pendulums moved the setting from File Island to the much larger Folder continent, justifying the inclusion of stronger and more varied Digimon. In at least one instance, monsters were even bumped up in evolution level to reflect this, such as Waymon now being a perfect rather than an adult. Aesthetically, Bandai also abandoned the pretense of the virtual pets being diegetic objects. Where the original digital monster toy resembled a cage the creature had broken free from, the pendulum was designed to look like a piece of high technology. The shell was smooth, sleek, and angular, fitting more naturally in the hand. The buttons were bigger, more tactile, and felt deliberate to press. Players were still limited to a single egg per device, but each version's roster of monsters was themed, creating a stronger sense of cohesion no matter which evolutionary branches you followed. Even the smallest details were upgraded. The device now made a noise when your Digimon pooped, making waste harder to ignore. Sleep sprites were less generic, Vamdemon sleeping in a coffin, Pico Devimon hanging upside down like a bat, so on and so forth. Attack animations were now unique to each Digimon instead of recycling the same handful over and over. And Digimon themselves were drawn at 3/4 angles rather than flat profiles, giving them more presence and personality despite using the same 16x16 monochrome screen as before. None of this directly affected gameplay, but it deepened player attachment to each individual monster. And that mattered. Mechanically, the Pendulum introduced both the 6th stage of evolution, Ultimate or Mega depending on your region, as well as the vaccine data and virus attribute system fans are now familiar with. A bunch of new Stage 6 Digimon were created, and a few former perfects, such as Saber Leomon and Holy Dramon, were promoted to the new stage. Each device contained 3 evolutionary lines, 1 per attribute, branching into 2 sublines at the adult and perfect stages before converging back into a single line at the final stage. Including baby forms, this resulted in 20 Digimon per device, compared to just 14 in the original pets. Attributes functioned like rock, paper, scissors. Vaccine beats virus, virus beats data, and data beats vaccine. Tournament trends quickly emerged. The typically more heroic vaccine types, such as Heraclikabuterimon, Hoomon, and Holydramon, were extremely popular, which in turn made data types like Saberleomon and Plesiomon strong meta picks. Virus types, such as Pinocchimon and Mugendramon, thus became the high-risk, high-reward option, vulnerable to the popular vaccines, but effective against the datas chosen to counter them. Funny enough, this almost directly mirrors the same lean you see in actual rock, paper, scissors tournaments. Vaccines are rock, typically the most common opening move, while data is paper and virus is scissors. The difference here, though, is that players in Digimon have to commit to their choice for the entire tournament. So, for the first time, Digimon battles had a recognizable metagame, where decisions mattered before the fight even began. Of course, the Pendulum's most famous feature is the shaking, and it's important to stress that this wasn't simply shake it as fast as you can. The device counted the precise number of shakes, and the goal was to hit a very specific value depending on the Digimon you were raising. Each species had an optimal shake range that produced better results. Perfect shake counts could trigger mega hits, multiple finishing blows in a row, which during training would instantly fill empty hearts, and during battle could completely swing the outcome in your favor. Shake too little or too much, though, and you would miss that window entirely. This single change reframed player interaction almost completely. Battles were no longer passive. They demanded attention, rhythm, and restraint, almost ritualistically so. Before, you were raising the strongest Digimon you could and hoping the dice rolled your way. Now, it felt like you were learning each Digimon's preferences, much like a teacher adapting to different students' learning styles. If it hadn't already, raising a Digimon now truly felt like training an athlete. The flow of battles themselves was also overhauled. Instead of a single decisive blow at the very end, fights now played out in rounds. In each exchange, one Digimon would hit and the other would miss, repeating until one side ran out of HP. The strength of each attack was determined by your shake count before battle, with super hits dealing extra damage. Hit rates were influenced by strength, attribute matchups, and training quality. Digimon were more likely to dodge attacks if they had a type advantage, regardless of raw strength or mega hits. Protein still increased strength by 1 point, but now also increased the chance of injury, adding another layer of risk-reward decision-making. The Pendulum also factored in how full a Digimon's strength gauge was during battle, meaning training mattered not just for evolution, but for combat outcomes, in visible mechanical ways. To support all this, the Pendulum introduced Digimon Power, or DP, a stamina resource required for nearly everything. Jogressing, training, and battling all consumed DP, which recovered gradually through sleep or by feeding protein. But protein now carried risk. Overuse could make a Digimon sick, forcing players to balance performance with rest, and to think ahead if they were planning a long day of battles. Alongside Stage 6 evolution, the Pendulums also introduced Jogress Evolution, or DNA Digivolution. Jogress, short for Joint Progress, allowed two compatible Digimon on connected devices to instantly evolve, bypassing standard requirements and ignoring care mistakes completely. This added another layer of depth to the raising process. Past the adult stage, several evolution paths were dead ends, requiring Jogress to progress further. Likewise, many Digimon introduced at higher stages could only be obtained through Jogress, making them inaccessible to solitary players. Jogress was a two-way street. Both Digimon evolved independently using one another's energy. Compatibility was determined by attribute, the process would completely drain both monsters' DP, and not every Digimon was capable of Jogress, but when it worked, it benefited both players. As a result, evolution, just like battles, became a social event. Jogressing encouraged cooperation and planning within friend groups, with players coordinating their raises to help each other reach higher forms. Reaching a dead-end evolution could be frustrating if you didn't have a compatible partner, something I experienced personally as both of my Digimon hit dead ends at perfect and were not Jogress compatible, but it also reinforced how significant Stage 5 and Stage 6 evolutions were meant to be. Today, perfect and ultimate forms are treated as a given across the anime, games, and cards. Players feel entitled to reach those stages. But in the era of the virtual pets, anything beyond adult was something you had to earn. High-level Digimon were status symbols, proof of your planning, effort, and dedication. If you had a mega-level Digimon, that meant something. Each Digimon also had a unique hit rate, influenced in part by its evolutionary route. Sticking to one attribute throughout increased your hit rate, but gradually evolving toward the attribute you originally countered, so for example evolving from vaccine to data to virus, increased it even further. It was a subtle way of rewarding foresight over just impulsively evolving your Digimon willy-nilly. More importantly, all of this reflected a conscious effort by Bandai to design against competitive sameness. Unlike the first D1 Grand Prix, the Pendulums actively discouraged everyone from raising the same half-dozen Digimon. The idea of Trashmons and Secret Digimon was dropped entirely. Instead of funneling players toward Monzaimon, Digitamamon, and the like, the Pendulums allowed players to raise who they liked without feeling punished for it. This time, your Digimon choice was genuinely your own. As the Pendulum line was gradually rolled out, the manga Digimon Adventure V-Tamer began serialization in V-Jump magazine in late 1998, introducing characters Taichi Yagami and V-Dramon, and like the Pendulums, was set on the Folder continent. Without going on too much of a tangent, let me just say that V-Tamer is an essential piece of Digimon media. I'd go so far as to say that every Digimon fan owes it to themselves to read it at least once. It's the longest-running single narrative in the franchise's history, both predating and outliving the original anime's 4-season run. More importantly, it is the purest narrative expression of the virtual pets concepts. Digimon are fed, trained, coached through battles, and evolve permanently. They're treated as pets and partners in equal measure. It's also just very competently written, with its only real flaw being that a couple of later plot threads had to be cut short after the series was announced for cancellation. Western fans often overlook it because it was never localized, but in Japan, V-Tamer carries just as much nostalgic weight as the anime does, and it pushes just as much merchandise. Between late 1998 and mid-2000, 6 main Pendulum versions were released, each with 2 shell colors to choose from and a distinct thematic roster. Special .5 versions were also produced as tournament prizes and mail-order exclusives, swapping out select Digimon for alternatives, such as Pendulum 1.5 receiving the Anjuamon line. Nature Spirits focused on jungle and mountain Digimon. Deep Savers leaned into ocean monsters, and the third Pendulum, the horror-themed Nightmare Soldiers, was initially planned as the final entry, as at the time, Bandai had begun shifting attention toward Digimon's expanding multimedia presence, the anime, card game, and video games. But sales refused to slow down, and inevitably, 3 more Pendulums followed. Wind Guardians featured plant and sky-themed Digimon, and marked the first overt cross-promotion with V-Tamer by introducing V-Dramon into the pets. Metal Empire was all mechanical monsters, and Greymon for some reason, and completed the full set of Dark Masters by bringing Mugendramon, previously the final boss of Digimon World, into V-Pet form as well. Finally, Pendulum Zero Virus Busters launched in March 2000 alongside the second Digimon film, Our Wargame. It featured a roster of holy and heroic Digimon, and uniquely excluded virus types entirely, filling those spots with more vaccine types instead. It was also the only Pendulum to introduce no new Digimon whatsoever, instead serving mostly as the V-Pet debut of Omegamon. It also broke several established rules, allowing Data-type Perfects to reach Stage 6 without Jogress, and permitting certain final stage Digimon to Jogress even further. More than anything, Virus Busters existed to bridge the gap between anime fans and virtual pet fans. Dedicated fans of the Digimon anime tended to prefer the anime-specific Digivice toys over the original virtual pets, and Virus Busters was attempting to meet those fans halfway by appealing directly to anime tastes. The fact that each Pendulum device was built around a clear theme already spoke to a more deliberate approach from Bandai, one aimed at creating cohesion not just within individual devices, but across the brand as a whole. The original Digital Monster V-Pets had flirted with theming early on, sometimes through deliberate opposites, like version 1 featuring Devimon while version 2 featured Angemon, or Meramon contrasted with Yukidarumon, other times through looser motifs, such as version 1 pairing Seadramon and Airdramon, and version 2 pairing Waymon and Birdramon for a sea and sky motif. But by the time version 3 rolled around, this kind of internal logic had largely fallen away. Roster construction became more scattershot, and whatever thematic intent existed early on was no longer a guiding principle. The Pendulums, by contrast, committed fully to their identities. Each release adhered closely to its central motif from start to finish, reinforcing the sense that these weren't just incremental updates, but carefully curated ecosystems designed to feel distinct from one another. Something about the early Digimon virtual pets retains a certain mystique to this day. Unlike video games, electronic toys are more cumbersome to pick apart and data mine, and Digimon's more niche status means much of its early history remains somewhat opaque even to this day. And speaking as a Westerner, where the Pendulums were never released at all, it's difficult to fully grasp just how successful they were in Japan. Bandai repeatedly attempted to end the toy line only for demand to extend its lifespan by nearly 14 months. Yet despite that success, no direct successor to the Pendulums appeared until 2002's Pendulum Progress. Bandai's priorities had shifted. The Digimon anime had become a global phenomenon, overtaking the virtual pets in popularity and reshaping the franchise's future as a result. From that point on, the pets took a back seat as Bandai focused on cards and video games, while Toei carried the anime forward. Ironically, by the time Digimon Tamers aired, a series explicitly about Digimon as a media franchise, the virtual pets were the only branch of the franchise not being represented on screen. The show paid the occasional homage, whether through the Digivices themselves or through evolution lines lifted straight from the Pendulums, Gatsumon to Monochromon, Floramon to Kiwimon, Ganimon to Sealamon, and so on, but the V-Pets as objects and as a mode of play were never explicitly shown or acknowledged within the anime. On a practical level, this shift in priorities is easy to understand. By the early 2000s, the 90s virtual pet boom was already well past its peak, and Bandai's focus had turned toward expanding Digimon into media with more durable, long-term appeal. In that sense, the absence of the V-Pets was a calculated realignment with where the franchise believed its future lied. Nonetheless, the Digimon Pendulum was a complete improvement over the original digital monster in nearly every way. It expanded player control, added real depth to battles, and transformed evolution into a social system. It was still more luck than skill, and much of its complexity remains obscure even today, but it represented Digimon at its creative peak. Arguments could be made that the third-generation pets, the Pendulum Progress, with its larger screen and expanded stats, was mechanically richer as a whole, but the second-generation pets were where Digimon's popularity truly peaked. Later devices increasingly relied on gimmicks to stay fresh, with mixed results. The Pendulums were where the digital monster concept existed at its fullest, purest potential. If the original digital monster was Digimon's red and blue, then the Pendulums were its gold and silver. And when you look back on Digimon Adventure, its emphasis on partnership, training, earned evolution, and personal growth, it becomes clear just how much the anime owes to those little plastic devices. Even with all the liberties the anime took, the virtual pets still defined the basis of Digimon's world. The Digimon virtual pets may not have lasted forever, but everything Digimon became was built on them. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Hope you liked the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I would really appreciate your support. I don't usually do the whole call to action thing in my videos. I make videos more for the sake of it than for, trying to build an audience. But at the same time, I would also like to have an audience rather than just, screaming my opinions out into an empty void. But for those of you who don't know, back in September, my entire channel was demonetized. Because even though I had been monetized for a year and a half and never had any problems with the content policy, never got flagged ever at all, in September, YouTube's AI moderation decided that my entire channel somehow got flagged for harassment and bullying. You got me. And it's basically impossible to talk to an actual person at YouTube about it at this point, because you just get a bunch of AI responses in a loop over and over. No matter what you say, they will not let you talk to a real person to fix these problems. So as much as I'd like to do this channel for free, I literally can't afford to. So if you'd like to support me, I have a Patreon, and it would really help if you could donate whatever you can. My lowest tier is $2 a month. It's fine if you can't manage it, but I'd appreciate any support that you're willing to give. The link is in the description. And, there are a couple perks to being on my Patreon. If you are in the $20 tier or above, you get your name in the credits of the end of all of my videos. And also, there are a couple times where my videos got flagged by YouTube's copyright system, and I had to, it could be music, could be footage I used. Sometimes entire segments have to be cut for copyright, but those uncut videos will be available completely on my Patreon. like my first Digimon V-Pets video, the song I played at the end is actually completely different from what's in the YouTube version, because it got flagged for copyright and I had to take it out. But the uncut version's on my Patreon. Another example is my Final Fantasy VI video, which had maybe like a minute or so cut near the end for copyright because the music got flagged. But anyway, if you're interested in that, that's also on my Patreon. And also lately I've been considering maybe even uploading the raw gameplay footage I've recorded for every game I've talked about so far. So like, it's got to be over 50 games at this point. Yeah, it's way over 50 because I've done at least 60 videos. So if you're interested in that, I might start doing that soon. I don't know. I'd have to get feedback because I don't know how many people would be interested in that. But that's only going to be on the Patreon. I might also start uploading outtakes. I don't have a lot of outtakes and they're not very great, but you know, it might be kind of funny. So if you're interested in any of that, or if you just want to support me and keep me going, because I can't afford to do this for free. I love doing this, but I can't afford to do it for free. So thank you to those of you who are already members. You're a couple regulars and I really appreciate you. But I'm going to wrap this up because it's already gone on too long. But anyway, yeah, Patreon, link in the description. Thanks for watching. Have a good day, guys. And you just keep doing what you're doing, whatever that is. Yeah, we'll see ya.